Hello, my fellow creatures, and welcome to Video Melt, a horror movie commentary podcast. I'm Jake, and I'll be sharing my thoughts and opinions about different horror movies, particularly on their music, plot and writing, and overall creepy effect. So, just to say that this is my very first episode of my very first podcast. I have been a horror movie fanatic since I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I don't know, this is just something that I wanted to do for a long time, and it's just one of my biggest passions. So I am going to be starting this very first episode of this very first podcast, and our first movie that we are melting down, so to speak, is going to be the 2006 reboot of When a Stranger Calls. So, if you don't know anything about this movie, first of all, spoiler alert, because we'll be going into this movie in depth. But if you don't know anything about it and you don't care about the spoiler alert, or you need kind of a refresh, here's just kind of a basic description of the film that I found online. When a Stranger Calls is a 2006 American psychological horror film directed by Simon West and written by Jake Wade Wall. The film stars Camilla Bell, Brian Garagti, Katie Cassidy, and Clark Gregg. Bell plays a babysitter who starts to receive threatening phone calls from an unidentified stranger, played by both Tommy Flanagan and Lance Henriksen. Did I do that right? Henriksen. Yeah. It's a remake of Fred Walton's 1979 film of the same name, which became a cult classic for its opening 23 minutes, which this remake extends to a feature-length film. So, as it says, yes, the majority of this film takes place at the home that our character, Jill Johnson, is babysitting at, and so we'll kind of get into all of her, experiences, horrifying as they are, in that house. So we'll start out here just by kind of talking about the opening scene and such. So we're just kind of rolling with this here. So to kind of give a basic idea here, like with your opening scene, you have like a really good contrast between this county fair that's taking place in a small town where all the families and kids are running around, screaming, having a fun time. And you have a close-up on this house where this young girl, Stacy, is getting strange phone calls. So we have this kind of eeriness going on in contrast to the very fun, county fair going on outside. It's like nobody knows what's going on inside this house because everybody's just preoccupied with this fair. And we just kind of see this kind of small town kind of idea. There's some parents outside calling their kids to come back home for the night. And we see this neon sign across the street in these pink and blue letters that says, Jesus Saves. So, we kind of have that kind of eerie, message where we know there's some things that are going to be going down that are very un-Jesus-y, so to speak. So Stacy in this house is getting these calls when someone strange is asking to speak to these unknown people. She doesn't even know who he's talking about. And she keeps getting more of these calls, and the guy is just breathing and breathing, like very kind of in a gruff manner, but it's still kind of quiet. It's just very eerie. And the camera keeps quickly panning around with people running by, and it's kind of really jarring the audience, as you're watching it. The music is very heavy, building up, and then we have a momentarily settled moment with very soft but eerie piano chords. It's got a lot of nice like crescendo and decrescendo going on. The music is already kind of putting you in the vibe. It's pretty good, right? And there's this overall feeling of no one is safe, like even in the small little happy town, the county fair, the families calling their children in for dinner. It's all very, looks very peaceful on the outside, but anything could be happening in these small towns. So it's just kind of like, nobody's safe. The camera pans to the house again. Then out of nowhere, the music, the sounds, the fair, everything goes dead quiet other than these crickets. And then we see a silhouette through the window when the bedroom light comes on. And then, the music is crashing, and then we just see a person, the shadow of a person, lunge and attack Stacy, and we hear just a scream of bloody murder, and it's a very excellent scream, by the way, because side note, there are some horror movies, very well-known horror movies, where you have people screaming and like being very scared and acting crazy, and it's very believable, but then you have even some like great movies like the original 1978 Halloween film at the beginning, where Michael's older sister, he kills her, and she's like screaming very like, "Oh, Michael, no, Michael." Just like, not a lot going on there. That's one of my only kind of like bad notes on that movie. But anyways, back to this movie here. So just that whole beginning part, I feel like it's definitely kind of like setting the tone for sure. And honestly, when it comes to reboot, I'm not sure how people felt about this who had seen the original film and then going into the movie theaters, which I imagine it came out in theaters in 2006, and seeing this, and they're kind of like, trying to see if it holds up, to the original, if someone's very much a horror movie fan, which I've seen the original as well, and it's kind of a whole different vibe overall, I would say. The original is very much more kind of like crime, like psychological, kind of in a way that like Silence of the Lambs is, that kind of thing. So but it definitely sets the tone, and I think that people who might have been skeptical about how it's going to go, they might be, "Oh, this is going to be very interesting," but then of course we have to deal with the mid 2000s and the how the acting and how everything kind of plays out in these mid 2000s reboots. They're kind of known to be kind of cheesy a lot. So anyways, we'll see kind of how it moves through here. So we come to the next morning, and it's a crime scene, obviously. Neighbors and kids crowding around. The lead detective shows up. They're going up to the upstairs bedroom, passing by quintessential family portraits of, what used to be a happy family. And then here comes the kicker. There's no murder weapon. And not that they didn't find one, but that there could not have been one used. So the scene is not revealed to the audience. The bedroom is not revealed, but then you kind of get the image of what's going on, because then outside people are watching, and everybody from the investigative team are bringing out like body bags, but like small, like handheld body bags, and varying sizes for varying body parts. So basically, we have to assume that he just ripped her to shreds, so to speak. So it's a little, I feel like in a sense, kind of over the top. Because that takes a lot of gusto. Like, you're just gonna rip somebody apart with your bare hands, which I believe is what kind of took place in the original movie at the beginning, but it was done to like the children, like that the girl was babysitting, right? But this is just kind of the beginning of the movie here, and but it's also like very eerie. Like, if you're not really kind of like just overthinking it, I think you do get kind of like oh my god, look at all those small bags, like she's ripped apart and da. Like, what do you mean no murder weapon and all this kind of stuff. So I like it. I like the groove of it. I like the eeriness, and the music did very well to just kind of like almost kind of like this overture, you know what I'm saying, that's going on during this complete opening scene. So I'm into it. I'm into it, right? Side note, just to let you know that this is actually my favorite mid-2000s reboot of all time, for a lot of nostalgia reasons, which we'll get into that later, of course. Okay. So, next, this is later on, I think months later, we're in Fernhill, Colorado. It's like 125 miles away from wherever the heck that state fair was. So, we're at high school. Right, and we see Jill. There's Jill Johnson, and she's running track, and they're training and whatnot, and they have in their, this is what's really cool, like in the gym in this high school, I've never seen this before in another movie or like in schools, like my school or any high schools I've visited for whatever reason. Um, Back in the day, I've never seen. They have like this. It's like this hanging like overhead track that's in like the gym, the school gym, and it's like this hanging platform that I guess they go upstairs somehow, and then they're running around this thing, and you're looking down onto like the basketball court. Um, I don't know if this is like, I don't know where they found this. Like, I believe the whole thing was filmed in California. Obviously, it was probably not filmed in Colorado, but I've never seen that. But maybe it's like more so a thing like different schools. I was always like jealous of like that as a school. Like if they had different things, like the schools that had like a pool for their swim team. I'm like, where are all these high schools getting all these like crazy things? Anyways, so she's running on this track thing, and she's like looking down. She can't really focus, and she's not meeting her her goal, her time goal, because she's staring daggers down at the basketball court, looking at her pretty much ex-boyfriend Bobby at this point, which we'll get into that. They have a whole thing going on. Her coach is like, you're not focusing, and she's like, you need to run like you've never run before, focusing on something in the distance like nothing else exists, which that kind of plays in a little later. So then later, we are now by the lockers. Here's Jill. She's looking at her phone. She's, looking at a picture of her and her best friend, who now, she doesn't like anymore because, we find out that her best friend, or somewhat of a best friend, Tiffany, had kissed Bobby. I know, right? Very high school. And not to mention that, but she's out of minutes for her phone. She went over her minutes on her phone, for anybody who remembers how that was a thing back in the day. You had a certain amount of minutes, and if you go over that, you get all these extra charges or whatever. So mom and dad are pissed, let's just say that, because she's been fighting with Bobby on the phone, going on for hours and hours, like talk about God knows what. It seems like a very, very simple kind of thing. Well, here comes Bobby at the locker, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, what else do you want me to say? And blah, 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 blah. And then she's like, I saw you with her, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, oh, well, she kissed me, and I barely remember it. Okay. All right, Bobby. That's some nonsense right there, but we'll go ahead and push past that. So, classic thing, she's grounded for going over her minutes. There's this huge school, everybody from school is getting together to go to this huge bonfire, like on the other side of town, like in the woods. She's not going to be able to go to the bonfire now, and she has to babysit to pay her parents back for the minutes she used, because they're trying to make her a responsible young adult. Whereas, the actor at this point is like 26, well, actually, no, not. Usually you have like the older, people in their 30s playing like teenagers in these movies, but I think she was actually like 18, 19 at the time. But her friend tries to comfort her by saying, who needs a bonfire party anyways? It's just a bunch of skanks and jocks acting like idiots, right? And right you are. So anyways, just kind of like to look at that, very mid 2000s, very cliche, very, thing with the boyfriend, and oh wow, you're creating the drama and the tension. And she's got the flip phone out, and she's like crumbling up her picture of her best friend, her little like Polaroid that she keeps in her locker. It's just it's very that, right? So later on that night, she's gonna go babysit. Dad is driving her out, like on these hillsides of Colorado, which is not Colorado, it's California. But Daddy's driving her out there. He's pissed that she went over by 800 minutes, mind you. I'm not gonna do the math in hours right now. So we're driving out. It's very pretty, very secluded though. And then the house. Wait till you see the house, because this ain't no regular babysitting job, let me tell you. So we're going out, right? And the dad is like, are you gonna be okay out here alone, da 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 da? And then Jill goes, well, it depends if they have TiVo. Y'all remember TiVo when that became a thing? Like, no more VCRs for us, we're recording everything through TiVo and all this kind of stuff. That was big. I think it wasn't their simple Their logo was a kangaroo or something like that. I can't even remember. Something along those lines. Well, we get to the house. It's a lake house, secluded, right on the water, mountain ranges as far as the eye can see. Very luxurious, but very, very creepy. Like these tall windows that go like the whole length of the wall, like 12 feet, like surrounding the living area, the living room. And, of course, there we are with this feeling already of like someone was out there watching you, right? And the house, the house, the way it's built, kind of looks like a Jenga tower, but it's like wider. You know what I mean? Like a Jenga tower that you've been kind of pulling some in and out, and it's kind of like lopsided and such, but it's like wider out. I don't know how to explain it. Like building blocks. I don't know how to really explain that. And to add to this creepiness, like, because once we get in there and like we're exploring the house, we're just getting, shown around by the parents. There's this very creepiness, the very creepy aspect about the house where nearly each room like has its own motion sensor, like automatic lights. They shut on and off like when you go into a room and you leave it. That kind of plays in a little bit later as well. And the parents of the children, they're definitely like rich weirdos. It's like a doctor and his wife, the Madrockans, and they, have all this fancy stuff. They have a closed-off indoor bird sanctuary with like a man-made pond and like a little mister for like all the trees and everything. And they have this live-in maid who may or may not leave to go take care of her sick mother. Maybe not. And then there's also this little black cat called Chester, who's just he's very chill, but he's like always kind of coming around the corner. He's just kind of he just kind of adds to the, he's just another player on the board. You know what I'm saying? So, not to mention we also have a guest house on the kind of towards the other side of the property, and it's where the son from the doctor's first marriage, he's in college, and sometimes he comes down, but he never tells them because he's this punk kid, and so we'll see if he comes back tonight or not. We'll see. So now the children that she's babysitting, they're already safely tucked into bed for the night. They came down from the flu, so they finally are like getting a night's rest. They're already in bed, so easy ride for the babysitter, right? Parents leave, and the dad leaves by saying, just make yourself at home. And then we begin exploring the house. So very creepy atmosphere already. There's just this kind of like, you're going to be left to your own devices, which that's the thing in babysitting, which is why like there's so many like things about babysitting in horror movies. It's just kind of like you're very still adolescent, especially because you're in high school, the thing with Halloween or whatever. And it's just like this kind of innocence and also like vulnerability, and you're by yourself, but you also have this responsibility for the kids. It's just like a very like perfect kind of setup for horror to kind of take place. So Jill's exploring the house. She's snooping around, literally like going through their things, like going into her bathroom, and the wife has like all this beautiful jewelry because she's just like getting whatever she wants from Dr. Madrocken's second wife, like that kind of thing. And she's Jill's already being like spooked by noises in the home, and there's all this tense music that's kind of coming back. There's this eerie string music, kind of like what we saw in like that overture, or what we heard in that overture. And but just kind of keeping you on edge, pins and needles, because she's just going through all these rooms, and it's like, is there somebody gonna be waiting for her in that room? Like, you're just thinking about this, right? You're already in that mindset. And she's hearing some noises and things getting creepy, but it was just Rosa, the maid. She's in the bird sanctuary, feeding the birds. She waves hello, so you just kind of given these like little pockets of like, oh, relief, like, oh, everything's fine. It's just the maid or just the cat or whatever the case may be. Well, then we have our first call of the evening, and then it's just 2 seconds of breathing that she hears on the phone, and then cut. Phone call disconnects. So this game has begun, right? And we continue to be made uneasy by these auto lights turning on and off, and we're paranoid now because of that call. And the lights are kind of going, the automatic lights are happening in one room, and they're like, well, what's going on there? And then, of course, it's just Chester, the cat. He's going in and out of the rooms, and he gives us that first jump scare. Like, well, like the first kind of like, anticipated jump scare, right? So, again, very good scene. And the pacing is good. I will say that like the parents and Jill and the dad and everybody at this point, as far as the actors, like I'm not gonna sit here and say that any of them are winning a Golden Globe Academy Award for this film, but it's not bad, especially as far as mid 2000s go. I can think of worse, but this is not the most well produced movie of all time. Let's just be for real. If you have watched it, you know what I'm talking about, especially if you're a horror fanatic. And some people have like a very refined taste of horror where they won't like fool with any of these like any nonsense movie, what they consider to be a nonsense movie, anything that they feel is like very like B movie, C movie, any of the reboots or anything cheesy or anything campy. They just stick to they're very phenomenal psychological thrillers of The Silence of the Lambs and like any of the newer horror movies that are out. But I'm kind of one of those horror movie people where I just love everything all around, the good, the bad, the really poorly made horror movies, the low budget, the old stuff, the new stuff. I love it all. So that's why I'm doing this podcast, because I want to talk about all of them, and there's plenty to talk about. So anyways, back onto the story here. So now she's kind of chilling out. She's in the living room. She's on the phone, gabbing with her other friend. They're bitching about her boyfriend who kissed her ex-best friend and, talked about the bonfire and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, then the alarm goes off, which is unexplained at first. After a call from the security company, we then get a concerned call from Mrs. Mandrakis, and with a delayed response on the other end when Jill answers. So now she's just getting more paranoid. It's building suspense. Ends up being the mom. Just checks to make sure everything's okay. And they're like, oh, it was probably Rosa when she left, all that kind of stuff, right? Because Rosa has appeared to have, she's vanished at this point, right? So she probably just left. Well, then another call comes, and the pace begins to pick up now. So we answer the phone, and he speaks. Is everything okay? She's like, Dr. Mandrakis? Phone call cuts out, right? So now we've heard someone speak. Potentially was the doctor, but why would he kind of be so strange, Why? And she gets this phone call right after the alarm and everything. The alarm, right? So to say, is everything okay? Like, obviously someone who knows what just happened. So, and she's like, oh, it's the doctor. Oh, the phone call cut out, whatever. The wife told him that it's fine. So, he went back to their table, their dinner reservation. Everything's good, right? So the pacing's picking up. I like it, right? The night goes on, and we get a crank call from Bobby, one of Bobby's stupid friend, right, from the bonfire. And it confuses Jill, because she's like, okay, well, how many times did he call? Like, is this him just calling mess with me all night? And she's hearing more noises and more paranoid now. And she's curious, and she's armed herself with a fire poker, and she's like, is there Rosa in there, like, or is somebody here? She's like holding this fire poker from the fireplace, and she's just like rattling it, and she's like very nervous, and she like we got more of that tense string music kind of coming back up, and it's building again. Like, we're just kind of like anticipating more and more of like of a jump scare coming. Like, that's kind of where we're at in the pacing. So we're hearing like this pounding noise, like we can't quite make it out. She goes into the kitchen, and then, of course, just the ice maker, right? And naturally, we get like this fake out, jump scare when she closes the fridge door. Nobody's there, right? So she grabbed a popsicle. She's going back to the living room, and she gets another call. She's like, hello? And she turns around, and there's Tiffany standing there on her cell phone. She's like, it's not much of a jump scare, like where she turns around, she's like, oh, whatever. Like, she pops into the camera out of nowhere. Like, the camera just like, she turns around and then the scene cuts to, there's Tiffany standing there. It's just kind of like funny, just like, oh, Tiffany, what are you doing? So anyways, and yes, Tiffany, the one that kissed Jill's boyfriend, and that kind of thing. So she's made it into the house somehow. Apparently the garage door's open. That's what she said. So, Jill's like, damn, and she closes that garage door and she's like, what are you doing here? And da 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 da. So, this is the kind of like part where it's like, once again, very mid 2000s, like very high school. She's trying to make an excuse about why she kissed, Jill's boyfriend. It was like, I liked him first and I never got my kiss. So I thought I had it coming to me. And da 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 da. And Jill's like, oh, that's just the worst excuse ever. And then, Tiffany follows it up with, Jill, I'm a bitch. We all know it. You know it. I know it. We all know it. So, it's it's very cliche, very campy, little, just, it's not like we're like sitting here and like watching Shakespeare or nothing. And we don't anticipate to. So for anybody going into this, just like, if this isn't 100% perfectly, just like, Elizabethan, level of writing here, like, then your expectations were just, very, very jaded to begin with. So, so they call it a truce. They just kind of laughed off whatever and all this kind of stuff, right? So, but here we go to this kind of next part. This is kind of like this kind of heap of like, okay, something is happening. Something's about to happen to somebody, right? So Tiffany's leaving to go to the bonfire. She's getting back in her car in the driveway. But she's like hearing footsteps in the grass around her and the leaves kind of, crunching and stuff. And there's just kind of like this air of like nervousness going on. And of course the cliche comes where we drop our keys and, we have to get under the car to retrieve the keys. We're still hearing everything. And, we're hearing heavy breathing coming from somewhere, right? We're freaking out now. She gets up and she finally gets a key. She gets in the car won't start. Okay. Right. But we got it running in the end and we're backing out of the driveway, right? And she's backing out. But a tree branch has apparently blown over into the driveway because, it had been kind of, the wind had been picking up and everything, right? Now, this tree branch, let me tell you, she could have parked this she could have rolled this car right over that freaking tree branch, okay? There was like, when you like see it and when you just kind of look at it again, you're like, that is literally a twig, girl. You could drive that car over it and no problem at all. But she's like looking around, oh no, I can't get out now, so let me. And then of course she gets out of the freaking car to go over there and like try to move the branch, and then she's like messing with it like, oh, this is so heavy, and then trying, oh, quickly before he comes, and the camera's panning left and right and all this kind of stuff. It's a good scene because in the sense of like it's spooky and everything like that, and before you know it, she turns around and this camera, the camera like shot, it's just like very quickly approaching her and everything, like someone's like rushing up on her kind of thing. And so it's all very like creepy, very scary, but at the same time, it's like, okay, come on, the keys and the car didn't start right away, but it did. And the branch that you could easily, they could have I guess it had to be like big enough in the sense of like she had to get out of her car to move it, but if it was too big, it wouldn't be like she could feel like she could move it anyways. So I guess it's kind of like, it is what it is. It was just to get her out of the car, obviously, right? We had to get her out of the car somehow. Writing wise, right? So anyways, but she gets back to our camera goes back into the house now where there's Jill in the living room and she's hearing banging at the door, and she's like, why is Tiffany banging at the door now? So she's like walking to the door. She's not running to the door to be like, why? And because this person is banging on this door, right? Like in a panic. You don't hear anybody like screaming or shouting. I don't know if it's supposed to be like a soundproof door. I don't know, right? But you just hear the banging on the door. And then so Jill goes up to the door. She's walking because she's like, what does she want? And she opens the door and nobody's there, right? Last minute, something happened or whoever that was ain't standing there no more. So that's kind of how that ends. And like I said, you have some cheesiness to it, but overall, it's nice, good sequence. They do well with the music, that breathing kind of thing, which, the thing with like just, you can always kind of hear breathing in the audio of the film a lot. So, which I think is like kind of the calling card of this film, anyways, because it's just like, it's not so much what somebody says. Like when you watch Scream, it's like, oh, like, I can see you, Blondie, blah blah blah. That's not the line, but anyways, what's your favorite scary movie? Like, I'm watching you now, like all that kind of stuff. Like, this is just very subtle. Like, you just hear breathing, and that part is like, it's enough that, like, somebody is there, but you don't know what they want, what they're gonna do, what they're gonna say. That's kind of like the build up that I like. So she just kind of goes about the rest of the night. Bobby calls the boyfriend, right? He's confessing that, Cody, his friend, was pranking her. She's trying to figure out if it was only one time, that kind of thing. Well, the call drops because of the bad signal at the bonfire. A call from Tiffany's phone comes to the house, comes in to the house phone, when she can see it on the house phone that it's Tiffany because of the caller ID. So if y'all remember when that first became a thing, caller ID, that was like this whole big thing, right? And then she answers it, and she's like, I know it's you, Tiffany. I see your name on caller ID. And then we get a gruff voice going, this isn't Tiffany. And she's like, well, who is this? And then phone cuts again, right? So it's just like game after game here. We have a scene at the bonfire at this point. She's trying to call like one of her other friends up there. And the scene at the bonfire is very much like that typical thing of like 30-year-old people, people in their 30s playing high school teenagers in a horror movie. Like, that's all who's like on this bonfire scene. Like, it looks like a day in like one of those, like, Freaky Friday days in the office where everybody like dresses up as something, and the category of the day was like high school jocks and cheerleaders and band nerds and that kind of thing. Like, it's very that. So, we got a huge like wicker man burning all the jocks and nerds and everyone just alike, drinking and carrying on. And, call drops while she's calling her other friend. And Jill just begins to panic more and more, right? And, that feeling of being watched, it just grows and grows with her, especially. And there's like this sense of, like I was talking about, hearing the breathing, and it's almost like the music that's happening too, like the way it's swelling and deflating, like that kind of tone and pace of it is like almost like that kind of like respiratory kind of vibe of like, the breathing sound, like, and it's just resembling that creepy breathing that we've been hearing. So like, as far as like the music so far, especially, like, it's done like very well, just matching the scene, the guy who is composing everything. Which, if we go, because I'm just looking here, this gentleman here is James Dooley, which James Dooley, he composed and scored everything for this film. And as far as like his other works, he's mostly been kind of like an assistant and additional writer as far as the bigger projects, specifically a few times to Hans Zimmer in films like Da Vinci Code, things like that. And he has, I think he's done very well in this film so far as the music. I think it really fits. I think it's not too, it's not too over the top. It's not too much. It's not too much like other movies. I feel like it. Everything fits. Everything fits, and he knows the theme very well. So I think that's kind of like my take so far as the music goes, right? So, but Jill at this point calls the police because she's just really panicked now. And she feels a bit better after calling the cop. He calms her down, and she happened to see Rose's car outside while she was on the phone. She's like, oh, well then, Rose is still here. And the cop's like, see you there, you're not by yourself, but if you need anything, call me, all that kind of stuff. She's calling Rosa, and Rosa won't answer her phone, which she finds her phone in her purse. and all of her other belongings that are still in the maid closet. Well, she's like, well, she's still here, but where is she? She's investigating the maid's closet, and of course, here we go, another fake out jump scare, because the door of the closet is slowly closing, and we see some kind of figure, this dark figure behind the door, and when she turns around, she gets freaked out, but it's just a coat and like a beanie hanging like on the wall there, which it's like didn't look like something that Rosa would wear, and B, very strange placement. So obviously just for the sake of the fake out jump scare. So we're seeing a lot of that in this movie of like there, because the build up is the build up in the sense of like we know something's gonna hit the fan, right? But it's not like the whole movie is that. It's not like the whole movie is Michael Myers walking around and getting everybody. Like, we don't know what's going on. We're not supposed to know, right? So, now, it gets serious. We get another call. And the gruff voice is there again. He goes, "Have you checked the children?" And he hangs up. And she's like, "Dr. Mandrakis, like, what is going on?" Like, so she goes up the stairs, and it's kind of that building of that music again, the building of that tension, some strings and things like that. And when she opens the bedroom door and she sees the kids are quietly sleeping, no harm has come to them. We have that soft piano coming back, those soft piano corn, yeah, Children of the Corn. These soft piano chords that are coming back, and just that it's like comforting, but it's eerie, peaceful yet eerie, right? But just kind of just show that moment of like quietness, right? And she's making her way back downstairs, and she's like, okay, well, the children are fine, I don't know who that was, da 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 da. She's still kind of freaked out but doesn't know what to think. And the phone rings again when she gets downstairs, and then the same voice asks, "How were the children?" And now we know he can see us. Full panic mode now, right? Full panic mode. She's drawing all the curtains furiously, running around. The nail-biting string music returns, and it's kind of like at its like, just about climax of that, right? She calls the cop back. She's freaking out on the phone. The cop is like trying to calm her down. He's like, "Look, miss, like, you are out of control with this whole thing." I don't know what the cop thinks, but she probably sounds crazy to him. He's been helpful, but he's kind of tired of it, right? So the cop wants to trace the call next time he calls back. He's gonna send someone out to her, but he's gonna be 30 minutes away. But if she can keep him on the phone next time he calls for at least 60 seconds, then they can trace it and see what's going on. Because she has made it very clear to him that he can see her. And she's not thinking anything different at this point. So that is like the first big, somewhat climax. There's one climax and something typically, but this is kind of like that first like big moment of like, okay, like end of Act 1. Here we go with Act 2 of like, okay, now things are really gonna get heated, and how is this gonna come to an end, right? She's getting another call, trying to keep him on the phone. More creepy breathing, and he hangs up too soon. Can't trace it. Then, big thing, she noticed that the guest house living room light has come on now. She calls over to that phone over there. She has all these numbers, by the way, like on this list. Rose's number, the restaurant, fire, police, all that kind of stuff. She calls over to the guest house, thinking that the son is there. He came home for the night, or whatever. She's talking to him, but she just gets the voicemail. She's like, "Are you over there? Can you pick up?" Da 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 da. Well, she sees a shadow, a silhouette walk by the window a few times, and she's like, "Well, he must be there. Like, why isn't he answering the phone?" Now, mind you, at this point, you're like, "Oh, somebody's in there who's not supposed to be in there." But she, for whatever reason, is thinking that like this could be the son, and like, I need help. But regardless, she must think that he's sitting out there in the bushes somewhere watching her, right? So, but she gets this idea that she's going to go over there to the guest house, hoping that the son is there, and they're going to be together, over there. He's going to protect her, and she won't be alone anymore because she can't find Rosa. Or maybe it is Rosa. She's thinking somebody, right? So, she arms herself with a candlestick, like it's a game of Clue or something like that. And she books it on over to the guest house, and she is like running, just booking it. And when you're watching this, you definitely are like, don't go outside. What are you doing? Like, and you're in that kind of mode. And she locks the door and she's running through the woods, and you just have like that first person camera view of like running through the woods. And it kind of like nods back to her like track experience, where it's like, her track coach is like, run, look at something in the distance and pretend like nothing else exists. And it's like kind of nodding to that. So, you kind of bring it back to themes here. It's kind of wrapping up things pretty good. It really kind of connects pretty well enough. You know what I mean? So she gets over there, the door is unlocked. So then, or she brought keys with her, something like that. Because she had to lock the door behind her, all this kind of stuff from the main house. So the whole pad in here, right, is decked out, very mid 2000s. It's very tacky college skater boy, bedroom. It's just kind of like his main spot, right? Like his main hangout. It's kind of like, it almost makes me think of like the guest house in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or was it the pool house? I remember, Will and what was his cousin's name? I can't remember. All of a sudden, they're chilling there like one time. I don't know. It gives me that vibe, right? I don't even remember what that guest house or pool house looked like, but it just makes me think of that for some reason. Carlton. Is that his name? Carlton? Anyways. So she's over there, and another call comes in now, but to the phone in the guest house. And so she's like, I'm in here. Well, why else would you be calling this phone? How did you get the number for this phone? What's going on? And there's just more breathing. He's not saying anything, right? He's just been getting her little snippets of saying something. And since like that big phone call, he ain't saying nothing. He's keeping his hand very close to his chest, right? His cards close to his chest. But she was able to keep him on for 60 seconds. And she's like, I got you. But on the wrong phone line, right? So then she's trying to figure out what to do, but she sees a light turn on in one of the upstairs bedroom windows in the main house, that's Rosa's house. And then she sees somebody walk back and forth, another silhouette in the main house. She goes, oh, it's Rosa. She doesn't even think twice about it. She's like, Rosa, it's her. So then she runs like hell back to the main house. The same feeling, the same craziness, which that's like the one part about that I will say, that whole sequence of her running outside when she goes over to the guest house, in that sense of like, she has to go back to the main house. A, the kids are there. And B, she doesn't have like any kind of, now she knows she has to have them on that other line. Well, she actually has the phone from the main house in her pocket. So, but she needs to go back to the house for the kids. But the thing is that she's running over there in this expectation of like, once she gets there, she's going to have to come back. And that is just like eating at you, right? Once she's in that guest house and she's seeing all these silhouettes of people, I'm like, who is where? Because nobody was in the house when she got there, in the guest house. So who was in there a second ago? You know what I'm saying? So it's just, yeah. So she gets back to the main house. He's calling the house phone again, and more heavy breathing. And you just feel like his eyes are on her at all times. Like, you don't know where he is, but he knows where she is. And we don't know who those shadows and silhouettes belonged to. Are they different people? Are they the same people? Rosa, who is it? He's not responding to any of her questions when he's calling, right? She's trying to keep him on the phone. She's trying to talk to him. She's trying to keep him on for those 60 seconds. And she's just getting frustrated, and she's getting scared. She's like, are you trying to scare me? Are you trying to do this? What do you want? And his response finally comes, and he says, your blood all over me, in a breathy, gruff tone. And then she's like, all freaked out by that. She's like, ugh. And she like hangs up the phone. She's like disgusted, right? But that time she got him on the phone for 60 seconds. So now they can trace it. So now we're just playing the waiting game. She's looking for Rosa because she's still convinced that Rosa is there somewhere. Well, she must be. Where else would she be? And the shower is on in Rosa's bedroom, and no one's in the shower. I'm like, well, where's Rosa? She's standing there. She gets the call again. She's like yelling into the phone because she thinks that it's the guy, but it's the cop. And the cop is trying to get her attention because he and his team have traced the call, and it's coming from inside the house. So she turns around because she's hearing a cell phone ringing. She had dropped the home phone. She's completely in shock. She looks back, and it's Tiffany's phone ringing, and there's Tiffany dead on the floor. Now, one thing I will say about this before we jump into the climax of this here, she doesn't have any sort of visible like wounds or bruises or anything that would show as like a cause of death. She's completely intact as well. The guy didn't like tear her to shreds or anything like that. I don't know what that was supposed to be like. I don't know. He hit her over the back of the head or something like that, which is kind of strange. If that was all he did, because of like what we know him to, or we think he's the same person from the beginning of the movie, you would have to assume, right? So it's just kind of odd. You don't know how she's died, but she just looks very dead. They just kind of gray her out very much with like her skin tone and everything, and like her eyes are kind of buggy and like that kind of thing. So, but it was kind of a bizarre. I mean, it's enough. You're like, oh, she's dead. Like, but when you kind of look back at it again, you're like, well, how did she die? And she's just, it was kind of bizarre. In my opinion, I gotta look at this objectively. I gotta look at every, side of things, that kind of thing. So sometimes you gotta be the Debbie Downer on scenes, even if like it's a big, climax. I don't want to be a buzzkill, but that's what I'm here to do. It's just sometimes you gotta kill the buzz. But I'm gonna bring it back up. Here you go. You ready? So the music is bumping now. Okay, all the lights in the house go out. Most of them, right? He's in the house, but where is he at? Right? So she gets back to the kids' room, but they're not in their bed anymore. She's looking around for them, finds them in a large toy chest, like in this walk-in closet, and she's trying to get them out and talk to them. And then while she's doing all that, the lights in the house come back on. She's like, what's going on? They walk back into the bedroom, and there's a dresser blocking the bedroom door so they can't get out right away. And looks up, and there he is, Mr. Stranger himself. He is crouching on the loft above the bedroom, and now the chase begins. They're screaming. They're trying to get through like the bathroom, and she's like tying up the freaking like bathroom door handle like onto this towel rack or whatever with like a lamp she got, the wire from the lamp, and all this kind of stuff, right? They're getting out the window, and it's like inside like the house. Like I think actually, you know what I'm trying to remember now, but it doesn't matter. They get down to the the bottom level of the house, and they make their way into the bird sanctuary to hide. So they close it and they get in there, and they're trying like not to be seen. And when they're down there, they're starting to just kind of keep an eye on all of the rooms, like the windows and like, behind the walls. And because we're seeing these lights come on and off, like in the different like windows and such of the house, and little peaks and everything. And you can just basically see, you don't see him, but you just know that he's descending down the stairs because of all the lights going off and on, the automatic lights, so you can track him coming down. And then when the lights come on right at the base of the steps where he would be emerging from, it's just Chester the cat again going down there. And it's like, what the frick, where is he at? And turns around, and he's there pressed up against the freaking glass of the sanctuary, bangs his hands on it, right? And then they're freaking out. So she thinks quick. She uses the mister in the sanctuary, right, to kind of create a smoke screen. And they're hiding. The kids are hiding. And she gets like into the water, like underneath this like little like mini 2-step pier, right, like over the little man-made pond. And the kids are ready to escape. He makes his way in. The mist is starting to die down. The kids kind of ran for it, but he knows that she's in there, and that's who he wants, right? So he's standing like on the little, the little mini pier, trying to get at her. They kind of tumble in the water. She's under the water. She sees Rosa's dead body. So now we found Rosa. We know where she's at. And they're struggling. They get out of she gets out of the water, and she gets out of the bird sanctuary, quickly, shuts the door and locks it behind her. But she had some of her hair kind of caught in the door, and he's holding on to her hair. And she has to rip herself away from the grass and ripping her hair out and all this kind of stuff. But she makes it out, and he's now trapped in that bird sanctuary. It's so he's throwing chairs and shit at it, trying to break down the glass. She's trying to find the kids, all this craziness, right? And she's running around. She finds them, and she's trying to put them someplace safe. And when she's turning around, she stops for a second, and she sees one of the birds from the sanctuary sitting on one of the steps. She's like, oh, he's out. And he's looked around, and he jumps at her. Another jump scare. They're struggling again, struggling on the stairs, wrestling on the floor. They make it to the fireplace. She lights up the fireplace with the fireplace remote, and during this whole struggle, she throws a bottle of tequila that was left on the table from Tiffany and into the flames, and this kind of flame bomb burst of flames here. And once he's kind of on the floor, kind of trying to gather himself, she stabs his hand into the floor with a fire poker, and he screams in pain. She runs to the door. The cops are waiting just outside. They rush into the house, and everything's over. It's all said and done with. They drive him away. She's outside. She's in a little blanket, the little, when you're in shock, the emergency services give you a blanket. And they're driving him out of there in the back of the police car, and slowly the camera starts to slow down when you see his face. His face is only just now, it's just now where you can see it in lighting. You can actually see what he looks like. Everything was in shadow before. And he's just very creepy looking. He's very eerie looking. And you start to hear in the audio of the film these news reports that are going to be happening about everything. And they're talking about him, this strange person, this mysterious person, because his identity, they're saying, is a complete mystery. Nobody can figure out who he is. So there's just that air of mystery to him. As we close out this movie, she wakes up in the hospital, and you could hear a pin drop. There's no one there. No nurses, nobody. And we once again have that kind of calming, somewhat delightful yet eerie piano chords coming back, making you think everything is safe and sound. And a phone call comes to the hospital room she's in. But she doesn't answer it. And then the music stops, and it's silence. And we close the door, and bam, there he is. The stranger's come back for us. He's coming to get us. Take his revenge. But she wakes up. It was only a dream. And then she starts getting really dramatic, screaming about how he's in the house. No, you guys don't understand. And da-da-da. She's having a big old panic moment, trauma kind of thing. And the camera backs out into the hall, showing just a busy, normal hospital. And roll the credits, and the movie's over. So, to say about all of that ending, just to kind of get into that before closing out this episode here. Very exciting, the use of the lights, like I said, him coming down the stairs, tracking him, getting faked out by the cat once again. The bird sanctuary is this place to hide. Everything was set up very well, especially considering the original movie, I had read earlier, the original movie, the opening 23 minutes was this kind of thing at the house, and the babysitter, it was just some kind of townhouse, that kind of thing. It wasn't so theatrical, so they did very well, I would say, with the setup of this house, just kind of the pacing of everything, especially to this last fight, and we're hiding in the bird sanctuary, which was this, beautiful, gorgeous, very luxurious thing. And now it's kind of a place of, hiding and panic and struggle. And so I will say the other kind of part of that is when they're struggling in the living room, and he's got her pinned and choking her or whatever. and she's like trying to grab the remote. You know that thing where they're like trying to reach something and they're like walking with their fingers, trying to grab the thing to hit them. And she grabs the remote and she like turns it on, and then she gets a hold of that bottle of tequila, throws it in there. It's that struggle. It's very kind of like, high school play. Like, I don't really know how to say it. It's done well. So it's, cheesy, but it was done well, and you're getting kind of involved in it. You still can't see the guy's face very well, so you're having, you're in it, you're panicked with her, and it's still very fun, right? So, and then, the ending of it, like waking up in the hospital and, oh, it's just a dream, he's come back for us, that kind of thing. I mean, that's been done to death, but that's the whole thing with some of these cheesier films. Like, they may be a little bit more cliche, a little campy here and there, but it's the mid 2000s reboots. What are you gonna do, right? So, final thoughts, which I plan on doing these episodes by basically doing like a scale, like a final scale. So I'm gonna do a scale of the overall horror and creepiness scale, 1 out of 10. The plot and the writing, like a scale on that, 1 out of 10, and then the music, what I think about the music, and a scale of 1 to 10 there, and then just do an overall rating, the average of those things, right? That I will calculate with my math that I definitely did in my head. I didn't. And then the final rating, which is my own personal rating, that is completely different from all those in the overall rating average. It's just my personal nostalgia feeling about the film and what it means to me and right? So, to wrap up the thoughts, the movie, I think it's definitely, it's a reboot of a classic, and it in itself now has kind of become this kind of classic cult thing. It wasn't one of like the most successful horror movies of the mid 2000s or one of the most successful reboots of all time, but it made something new. It was definitely something that created a brand new aspect of an original film, which you don't typically always see. Like, the storyline was edited to quite an extent, but it just kind of became its own film in that way. So I've always liked that. The acting and the storyline and the kids, like, like bickering back and forth, but the boyfriend that kissed, the best friend, and the da-da-da on the bonfire, and the 30-year-old people playing the teenagers, all of that is to be expected. Let's just go ahead and say it. But, so it doesn't necessarily make for 100% of Rotten Tomatoes or whatever the case may be, but, it is what it is. And the music, like I said, the composer did very well, I thought, and this was his own project as far as the music goes from beginning to end. So I think it was done very well. It didn't really repeat itself too much. Like, it had very good themes. You can go and listen to the soundtrack of the movie, actually. If you got like Spotify or YouTube Music or whatever, you can actually listen to the total soundtrack is like a little bit different than how it like particularly plays in the movie, like certain tracks, but it's essentially all the same, and it gives you kind of like more of an idea of like, if you want to go and listen to that and kind of like compare it differently from just watching the movie with it, if you're somebody who's interested in like composition and film scoring and things like that, if you're nerdy like that, kind of like I am with music, then you might enjoy that, or something to have on the background, when you're having a Halloween party, you just need some eerie if you like to write, like horror fiction or whatever the case may be. So anyways, I appreciated that. So final thoughts here. The scales. The overall horror and creepiness scale, I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think if you're watching it, you're definitely sitting there going like, oh, don't go out there, don't do this, don't do that. Oh, that's creepy. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, I would give it more, other than the fact that like the jump scares and stuff kind of like cheesy, and like some things didn't really kind of add up sometimes or whatever, they were corny. But the overall feeling of it, the overall like eeriness of it, I appreciate. So 7 out of 10. Plot and writing. Now, I already discussed that it's not no Academy Award winning film. That being said, they already had a lot to work with because it's a reboot. So just going based off of what they kind of made themselves, it's it's got a good pacing to it and everything, but of course, a lot of cheesiness, a lot of corniness, a lot of things that don't add up. And, it's not necessarily like, the best casting and stuff like that. Well, no, it's really, really good casting, but it's like not the best acting. And, I don't, kind of goes into the plot and writing and everything for me. Anyways, with that all being said, I give it a 5 out of 10. And then for the music, like I said, loved the music. It if anything, it could have been more intricate to a certain extent, but I feel like it was really done very well for what it was, especially for a reboot. It made it very original, having that original music like that, and because instead of doing just like film, like various artists like playing like a bunch of which some movies have their own music, some have both their own music and popular music, and then the ones that just have a soundtrack of the different popular tunes of the time or of the olden times. So anyways, 8 out of 10 for the music scale, giving us an overall rating of a very fitting number of a 6.666, right? That is the overall rating, but here comes the nostalgia rating, my own personal feeling about the movie and how it feels in my heart and my soul as a horror fanatic, horror geek, all those kind of things. Like I had said before, at least I think I said it before, it is my favorite 2000s horror reboot of all time. It just has a special place in my heart. I can watch it over and over and over again. And it was very fun making this podcast episode about it, and reading it, watching it, and researching about it, and having all the fun. So I give it a personal nostalgia rating on the side of 9 out of 10 for that. And I don't give it the 10 out of the 10 because it's not like it's going to be like that I, couldn't give it up or something like that. Like if I had to choose something else to like only watch like three horror movies for the rest of my life, it wouldn't end up in that top 3, but it's up there for sure. So anyways, I hope that all you little creatures out there have enjoyed this very first episode of this brand new podcast. Again, this is Video Melt, and I'm Jake. And if nobody has told you this today, you are absolutely horrifying. And I hope to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.